So, good afternoon, Kia ora. My name is Peter Wren-Hilton. I've got various hats. The hat I've decided to wear today is co-founder of the Australia-New Zealand Agritech Council. And I think that's most appropriate because I'm joined today by four exceptional individuals from across the Tasman. I'm delighted that they're joining us. And what we're going to do basically is talk a little bit about the agritech landscape as it currently sits in Australia, but then also look at ways in which New Zealand and Australia can potentially collaborate more effectively in the agritech space. And so joining me today, I've got Andrew Coppin. Andrew is the chair of the Australian Agritech Association. We're also joined by John Harvey, who is the managing director of AgriFutures Australia. And with John, we'll be talking a little bit about both Evoke AG and Grow Ag, which I know some of the New Zealand audience will be very aware of. Delighted to be joined by Bob Furbank. Bob is the director at the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Translational Photosynthesis at the Australian National University. So that's quite a mouthful, but great to have you, Bob. And Bob will be talking a little bit about the research landscape currently in Australia. And finally, and possibly most importantly, Penny Shultz, who is a grower. She's actually a sheep and beef farming operator in the upper southeast, South Australia. And Penny consults to the dairy, beef and sheep industries and teaches in agricultural consulting at the University of New England. So it's great to have you all on the call today. And really just to start off straight away, I'm going to ask each of you just to talk a little bit about the organizations you represent. So perhaps, Andrew, I can ask you to talk a little bit about the Australian Agritech Association, its mission and kind of its vision.
Yes, thanks, Peter, and thank you for having us here today at Boma. Congratulations for everyone for being part of such an awesome event. As the founding director and chairman of Australian Agritech Association, or AusAgritech, as we're known, we started the association about 2 years ago on the back of the previous work that Peter had done with myself and some other Australian Agritech leaders to create the Australian New Zealand Agritech Council. Obviously, agritech's a huge growth sector here in Australia. We see it as a very material contributor to our goal to create a $100 billion a year sector for our farming industries, currently sitting at around 65 billion and heading in that direction. We think that agritech can contribute about $20 billion towards that target. And we're also mindful that in a global remit, agritech's about a $700 billion a year sector at the moment. And that, Australia, New Zealand, our region really should be seeking to seek involvement in sort of $20 billion or more of that into the global market. So AusAgritech designed to enable better connectivity between the industry participants to represent and advocate for agritech at a national level around Australia, to help growers join and be connected to agritech technology, and also to work with government, research and other industry participants like John Harvey and his team at AgriFutures to ensure that we've got a sort of unified and well-organised agritech sector. We're really excited about the work that we've been doing with Agritech New Zealand. We think there's huge opportunities in the region for us to collaborate and work together. So great to be here today to talk about that.
Great, thank you very much for that, Andrew. John, can I ask you to introduce AgriFutures Australia to those people here that might not know who you are, and also perhaps provide just a little bit of context by referring to Evoke AG and Grow Ag.
Yeah, look, thanks, Peter. And again, look, thank you so much for the invite to participate in this conference today. Really appreciate it. New Zealand's such an important ally for us in many, many ways, particularly in the agri-tech space. So great to be here. And Peter, just personally, thanks for all the effort you've put into the relationship between Australia and New Zealand. It hasn't gone unnoticed. AgriFutures is one of 15 research and development corporations. You may have heard of MLA, Meat and Livestock Australia, Grains Research and Development Corporation, Dairy Australia, Horticulture Australia, Wine Australia. There's 15 research and development corporations. We're one of them. They're a partnership between farmers who pay a levy, statutory levy, and the federal government. Total spend on research and development is something like $850 million a year. So quite a big investment in R&D. If you actually look at the total leverage that it leverages, it's probably close to $3 billion when you look at the matching dollars that come in from organisations that we fund, like universities, CSIRO, state departments of agriculture. Now, our mandate within AgriFutures, we're probably one of the smaller or medium-sized research and development corporations. Our mandate, we've got levied industries, so we have 13 industries we look after, including rice, chicken meat, honeybees, tea tree oil. I won't go through the lot, but we've got 13 industries that pay a levy and we manage their R&D for them. We also invest in new and emerging industries. We've got about 30 industries now that we're investing in trying to get established. And we have a mandate to invest in issues that go across the whole of agriculture. So a big milestone for us was about nearly 5 years ago now, we moved from Canberra to Wagga Wagga. And I actually joined the organisation to shift it from Canberra to Wagga. In doing that, we took the opportunity to really rethink the organisation. And in some ways, Peter, we were a bit of a startup for the last 5 years. And part of that process, I went around Australia talking to young emerging leaders, 25 to 35-year-olds, and just asked them about their vision for agriculture. First thing about that was 70% of them were female. And the second thing was they didn't want government handouts. They wanted control of their destiny. They wanted commercial solutions. And 50% said they wanted to be involved in a startup, either as a founder or as an investor or as a customer. And that really twigged our interest. And from there, I traveled around US, UK, Singapore, New Zealand, looking at at what was happening in agri-tech around the world. And it just struck me how important it is that we're part of that. Well, firstly, that we are part of we're part of a global community and a global market, and we've got to operate in that marketplace. The other observation was when we're going around and talking to people, going to San Francisco, they'd say, "Where are you from?" We say Australia, and they see Australia and New Zealand almost like one country. Like they say Australia and New Zealand in the one sentence. And I think that's a real opportunity for us. Why not play to that? I guess the other issue for me is, I've spent my career trying to get outcomes for farmers from research. And our challenge has always been, our mindset has always been commercialising just for the Australian farmer. And that's 2% of the world marketplace. It's just not big enough. And a lot of technologies, you just couldn't make the business case to commercialise them for such a small market. And we've got to look at global markets if we're going to get a return on that $850 million that we're spending on R&D. So Peter, I'll leave it there, but I'm very excited to participate in the conversation.
Thank you very much, John. I think we'll cover off, hopefully, Evoke AG and GrowAg in subsequent questioning. But Bob, as I said before, you have a very impressive long title. I'm going to make it really simple. Could you tell me a little bit more about the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence and the work that you do there? That would be of real interest. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks, Peter. We've got some good, strong historical connections in plant science between Australia and New Zealand, and it's a pleasure to be here and talk a little more about how we can connect those collaborations to the agri-tech sector and work better together. So the Centre of Excellence that I look after comes on the back of 30 years I spent in CSIRO, working in crop improvement in the physiology, biochemistry, right through to remote sensing. So the Centre of Excellence is a 7-year investment across 4 universities, CSIRO and 2 of the CG research centres globally. And the idea there is to take our basic strategic research, which we have a very high profile in, in photosynthesis, how plants fix carbon dioxide and use light to produce all of our food, translate that basic strategic research into crop yields for improving food security and food production. So that's my passion really, is how to bridge excellence in basic strategic research and its translation into agricultural impact. And I think the medicos are really good at this. You know, you talk about translational medicine, but traditionally we haven't been so great at it, particularly in our plant-based agriculture. So our centre, 7-year investment, around $40 million. We work closely with the grains industry and as a pathway to impact for Australia, but also internationally with the Gates Foundation in third world agriculture. So to achieve those sorts of outcomes, you have to have a culture within the university to want to translate your research into impact for agriculture. Traditionally, there's been a view that universities want to publish papers in Nature, but don't really care about what happens to the work after that. I think there's been a paradigm shift in our culture over the last 5 to 7 years, where there's a strong interest now in working in that more applied space and seeing your work have impact on major global issues and on the Australian agribusiness system. And to try and improve that, we created a centre here in ANU in partnership with CSIRO, which is now in its 2nd year, called, it's got a long title too, abbreviated to CEAT, the Centre for Entrepreneurial AgTech. And that is to provide opportunities for students, young postdocs and researchers to connect with industry, small companies, startups, and move them into that translational space. And I'm here actually standing in for Owen Atkin, who's the director of that centre.
That was a great summary, Rob. Thank you very much for that. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about CEAT and perhaps some of the other research collaborations which ANU are currently engaged with. I'd now like to turn, if I may, to Penny. I introduce you as a producer. Penny is based in South Australia. And I think really for me, the real interest, Penny, is really to get a better understanding of your view of the agritech landscape in terms of adoption by growers and producers. So if you could basically provide your thoughts on that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, and thank you for inviting me to provide some producer and grower perspective to this discussion. Aside from being a sheep and beef producer and doing some teaching, I've also done some research in agtech adoption and sit on a couple of boards to do with agtech, one being AusAgritech, but also our state government has a South Australian Agtech Adoption Advisory Group that advises our government on all things agtech and in particular about adoption on farm. I suppose part of our plan was identifying barriers and looking for opportunities to partner and collaborate to fasten adoption, to help developers, and that's sort of a space that we've been developing over the last 12 months. I see there's lots of opportunities both within Australia and with New Zealand as well. We've got a good track record of working together in the past on certain issues. We've got lots of similar challenges. And I think we are also quite good competitors, particularly in the ag space, where we'll be a competitor in one sense, and then the next minute we'd like to call New Zealand an extra state to take some sort of cross-Tasman advantage to work together. But I see we've done it before. I think we can elevate the agritech industry to the next level, to be an industry in itself rather than just some tools and tech that help farmers do their job better. There's opportunity to grow it as an industry in its own right.
Great, thank you, Penny. Just following up on South Australia, I did mention just prior to this call going live that I'd recently been invited by the Minister of Primary Industries in South Australia to speak at Advantage Ag, which takes place in July. So I'm really looking forward to coming down to Adelaide. South Australia is a really interesting state for me in terms of its agtech strategy. The fact that last year South Australia kind of launched its own agritech initiative. That's a question I now really want to kind of open up, because it's very different from the environment we're used to here in New Zealand. In New Zealand, we kind of have a single, obviously single government, a central government. Right now we have the Agritech Industry Transformation Plan, which is a multi-agency approach working with industry. Obviously in Australia, you've got a slightly different constitutional structure, federal structure. So you have federal government with initiatives coming out of Canberra, but you also have a number of statewide initiatives. And looking in, I'm just wondering how you collectively think, for instance, agritech businesses in New Zealand should approach that kind of landscape market where different states might be leveraging different initiatives, you know, at the same time. So I don't know who would like to answer that question, but if somebody would like to volunteer, I'd be very grateful.
Penny?
Yeah, I can kick off. I'd say certainly don't wait for a national initiative. If you see a state government or industries at state level that are having a red hot go at some agtech or agri-tech programs, go direct and look for partnership opportunities. In our state in particular, the red meat and wool industries and viticulture and horticulture are going ahead in leaps and bounds. The state government's got some really good programs with agtech focuses, with producer technology groups, demonstration farms, producer focus farms. They're training farmers and service providers around agtech. And I know that the state government that have been helping to facilitate that are being inundated with companies and groups that want to be involved in that. And yeah, we're forever looking for new opportunities to grow that further. And I think once one state moves things along, the other states tend to follow as well. We're pretty competitive against each other, even within Australia. But I see that as a really good thing to rub off. And we do have some national initiatives coming across. AgriFutures launched like a producer grant scheme around agtech, which has been really popular. John might mention that as well, which goes across the board, across Australia. We've got a state-based one as well to help farmers be able to afford new agtech in their business if they can prove that it's going to have a positive impact. Yeah, but I'd say don't wait for a national initiative to partner. Look for those state-based opportunities, and I think things will grow from there.
Thanks very much, Penny. Andrew, would you like to add anything to that from a?
I mean, look, just to elaborate on Penny's point, I think, you know, obviously Australia is a big country, geographically and diverse, and temperature diverse. I mean, you know, we've got the southern states, you know, particularly Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia, WA. In the south, you know, there's immense, you know, expertise in viticulture and horticulture in those areas. You know, and then, you know, you go all the way to the north. I was in Rockhampton for the beef conference last week, and the focus is all on processing beef and large-scale beef production. You know, go back down south again, and you're talking about dairy. There's a clear lines for, you know, the cropping areas in the wheat belt, and, you know, fruit and nuts and everything, you know, right through, right up the east coast, that are dependent upon climate. So I think the opportunities for people from New Zealand to come here are to focus on the areas where there's known expertise, and find and seek out those clusters of people, and they can do that via AusAgritech or via AgriFutures, you know, Evoke, etc. Or if they're looking for research through Grow Ag, and find those areas where there's where that expertise is focused, and leverage that. And similarly, you know, obviously, you know, New Zealand has some very clear lanes within which it operates, and is a world leader in those fields. And we'd be saying to Australians who want to collaborate in those areas and look for opportunities to be seeking out those things via, you know, Agritech New Zealand and your other groups down there, Peter.
Great, thank you very much, Sir Andrew. John, I just want to pick up on a comment that you made earlier on in terms of your kind of world tour when you went to San Francisco and New Zealand and a host of other places. Obviously, one of the things that's really impressed me, and here I have to declare a kind of interest, just so in case anyone isn't aware, I have in the past sat on both Evoke AG and Grow Ag steering committees, and so I am aware of some of the background. But I mean, what's really impressed me about the work that you have done, John, and the team at AgriFutures is really to develop the Evoke AG brand, and more recently the Grow Ag brand, really to provide more visibility to the international market on just what's going on in Australia. It'd be really interesting to get your take on where you think Evoke Ag and Grow Ag are today and what vision you have for them going forward.
Thanks, Peter. I feel like we've sort of been on this journey together, Peter. But you know, when we went overseas, and you've been over too, I know, many times, but people they were intrigued. They were intrigued about Australia and New Zealand, and they knew that we were good at agriculture, both countries, and they also had a sense that we were good at innovation and good at research. Okay, so when you go into the conversations with them, they were intrigued and inquisitive. And they were also there was a bit of a mood overseas that, you know, we know all the local players. We're looking for something new, and so Australia and New Zealand was quite attractive from that point of view. But when you get down to it, we're a bloody long way away, and that's a big issue. It doesn't matter, you know. Look, we're a long way from the epicenter of agri-tech and startups in San Francisco, California. And also a lot of particularly the investors, they want to have strong influence and control over their investments. So jumping on a plane for 13, 14 hours was not particularly attractive to them. So with Evoke Ag, what we were aiming to do was make it comfortable and easy for people to come over. A couple of days at Evoke Ag, a couple of days on the beach and be home by the weekend was the pitch that we sold about Evoke Ag on. And it seemed to work. We ended up with 9 trade missions from around the world. And that's exactly what people did, and they actually invested and they made connections, and we've chased them up and followed up, and it was quite impressive how many people actually did a deal out of the first and the second event. So I think, you know, for us to be successful, we're going to be more successful together than alone. If people from San Francisco or from Israel are doing a special trip down to New Zealand and flying home and then coming down, you know, 3 months later to Australia, it's not going to work. We're better off lining everything up together and doing it together and making it convenient and fun for them to actually come and do that. So I reckon that was one of the lessons that we learned out of it. And I think we ended up with something like $4 billion worth of managed capital in the room at Evoke Ag. So, you know, quite successful at getting the right investors in the room. Now, with Grow Ag, what we found was it's a bit back to, you know, Australia can be a pretty hard place to navigate. Like, who's who in the zoo? How do you know where the experts are? How do you find people? And my picture was somebody getting off a plane at Sydney Airport, you know, stepping out of the airport. They're interested in horticulture robotics. Where do they go? Who do they talk to? Do they go to Toowoomba or do they go to Adelaide? And so Grow Ag was really about trying to help people navigate our system out. And on Grow Ag, there's over 2,000 projects. There's commercial opportunities. There's a map. You go to map view. You can see where everybody is located. You can plan out your trip. You can make contacts with each of your researchers or your commercializers or your startups, whoever it is you want to actually go and visit. You can map them out before you leave your own country. So you've got your trip organized. And when we've looked around the world, I haven't seen anything like it, a product like that, where you can actually see what's coming out of the publicly funded research. And you can see on a country scale what the commercial opportunities are. And I do think there's a real opportunity for us to do that together with New Zealand.
Thanks very much for that, John. I'm going to have just one follow-up question also, because one of the work streams within the AgriTech Industry Transformation Plan here in New Zealand is all around commercialization, with a very strong focus on publicly funded research. So I guess in our instance, we're looking at Crown Research Institutes, whereas you were looking at RDCs. I'd be really interested to know what your journey was like over that kind of 12, 18 months with the RDCs in terms of their first of all, I guess, a willingness to take part in something like Grow Ag, because traditionally, I know a lot of research institutes have their own, commercialization teams and really try and manage it very closely. Now that Grow Ag's gone live, have you seen any kind of change in attitude from the RDCs in terms of the performance and the kind of execution of that portal?
Yeah, so thanks, Peter. Look, we had very strong support right from the minister level with Grow Ag, and from this, and we specifically got buy-in from the CEOs and the chairs of the boards of each of the RDCs to Grow Ag, because culturally it was a big shift. Typically institutions want to hold all their commercial opportunities on their own website, and they can still do that. And to be frank, we don't get in the way. We're not a middleman. We don't get involved in any of the discussions or negotiations. All we are about is connecting potential investors, connecting potential partners with our RDCs, with our researchers. Once we've made that connection, we step back and get out of the way. We don't want to be involved. We don't want a position on the IP. We don't anything like that. But it's also been interesting because, my career has been in an RDC, so I know what they're like. And it can be very easy to just get caught up in a bit of a cycle of what's the next research project. So you get a project out there, and your first question, so what's the next project? And the commercialization sometimes gets left behind. And what we're finding with Grow Ag now is the RDCs are having to focus on commercialization. They're getting calls from people. People are ringing them and saying, I'm interested in that. And I want to talk to you about potentially commercializing that either in Australia or overseas. And to me, that's absolutely, I keep saying it's a problem, but it's a bloody good problem to have. So it is definitely challenging and putting a much more focus and emphasis on not just doing the research, but finding a commercial solution and a commercial opportunity out the other end.
Thanks, John. Bob, really following up on a kind of similar strain, you talked a little bit before about obviously the work that ANU are doing with CSIRO around CERT. And I think you also mentioned the collaboration that you've had with Plant and Food. So I assume that's Plant and Food Research here in New Zealand. What's the general attitude towards Trans-Tasman collaboration? Is it something that the university is looking for? And if so, what kind of frameworks, what kind of commercials are you looking at to make that joint research collaboration work?
Well, I guess traditionally, my experience in the Trans-Tasman collaboration has been through more basic strategic plant biology research, but I've also had interactions around the horticultural space and also in forestry. My background too is in the wine industry. We've got a family wine business just out of Canberra, so I've got some Trans-Tasman interactions in that area that are a bit out of scope for this discussion. But yes, I think there's a real opportunity, as John was saying, to club together with New Zealand across a number of different areas to develop some of our research collaborations into more commercial opportunities and opportunities that are more unique to the Southern Hemisphere. So one of the things that I've become involved in the centre is cross-disciplinary work, bringing machine learning and artificial intelligence into some of our crop science and how it can be applied both in a breeding context, but also in precision agriculture. And this has become a really hot topic in both Australia and New Zealand. And we've recently been extending it into space technology, so using satellite information to inform both agronomy and crop breeding, because satellite data is becoming incredibly prolific, incredibly high resolution, so it can be used for a whole range of different purposes that nobody really has been tapping it for. Because we're both in that Southern Hemisphere area where there are very few other large players in the agricultural space apart from South America, that's an opportunity, I think, for us to work together. And I noticed that in my background research before this meeting, there are a couple of companies already set up in the pasture space using machine learning and satellite data to inform agriculture in New Zealand. And of course, in Australia, I think there are 10 startups since 2017 in ag AI. So I think that's an area that we could build some pretty productive relationships.
Yeah, just following up on that, Bob. It just so happened that yesterday, obviously this conference, the Boma conference, is taking place in Christchurch, and I caught up with the two founders of Space. And for the last 2 years, they've organised an event called the New Zealand Space Challenge. Last year, it was looking at how satellite data and fixed wing data and UAV data could be used to work on soil and water, particularly within the agricultural context. And their challenge for 2021 is all around agriculture and climate change. How can we use satellite data to help farmers and growers manage those situations? So there's that very strong and very interesting. Obviously, in New Zealand, we have rocket labs, so we're actually sending up space rockets kind of every month now into space. So you've got kind of our newest industry combining with our oldest industry, which is agriculture, and it's really interesting to see that interplay between the old and the new. So in terms of Andrew, in terms of your view of the opportunity for more trans-Tasman collaboration, you've mentioned before AgriTech New Zealand, and I know that you've been over to New Zealand before. You've been over here for, I think, National Field Days, and certainly you were here for the Australian New Zealand Leadership Forum meeting where the Australian New Zealand Agritech Council was launched. What kind of opportunities do you see to increase that level of collaboration? What sort of areas of potential joint activity with AgriTech New Zealand and AusAgritech?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Look, I mean, I think they're vast, and we need to focus on what we can do best together. So not dissimilar to a startup, work on the things we know we can do really well together. Obviously, from a sectoral perspective, there are areas where there's clearly overlap and people doing magnificent work in both countries that could be better served working together and targeting world markets, which, as John said, are significantly larger than our own regional marketplaces. So, obviously dairy, viticulture, beef cattle, and, various areas of horticulture and cropping are the key things that come immediately and most obviously to mind. And then we've got infrastructure that's supporting the development of agri-tech, like our space industries that you just mentioned. And, obviously we've got companies like Myriota and Fleet operating low Earth orbit satellite technology solutions out of South Australia. And then I think at a more macro level, we've got sort of a number of themes that are pressing for all of us on the planet, not just Australia and New Zealand, but, obviously in Australia, we've got significant challenges around water management. And whilst they may be different in New Zealand, you're doing a lot of great work down there about, water purity and the Clean Rivers program that you're running. And so there's a whole group of a cohort of people working on better water management, more efficient water management. I mean, it is the key input into all things agriculture. And I think we could learn and collaborate more with one another to export great technology about water management and purification and monitoring into world markets where, we're seeing, our floods in Australia now are converting into North America's droughts. Utah has just declared a massive drought issue, and they're really going to be struggling for water resources this year and in years to come, right through that area, and in fact right down the whole valley. So there's that, and obviously the big macro theme that we're all very familiar with, and that's carbon reduction, carbon zero, and sustainability initiatives, where again AusAgritech is working with and aware of dozens of brilliant companies and minds across all sectors that are represented here today through Bob's work and Penny's work, and obviously John's connected to more people in agri-tech research than anyone in the country. about how we produce more with less, how we produce less carbon, and how we sequester carbon from the soil and other things. And again, all of these innovations are happening. They're real now. Some of them it's very nascent, but emerging. And again, I'd put it to people out there on this call, if that's your area of expertise or endeavour, or you're interested in knowing more about it and working with your fellows across the ditch on these things, then by all means reach out to us and engage, because I think collectively if we work on honing these things in our region together, and then seek to export that technology and expertise into larger world markets, we can bring material capital in both investment, people, and further expertise to this region. I think in closing, we need to decide as a region if we're going to be sort of makers of great technology or takers of great technology. I think New Zealand have already spoken on this matter and have decided that they're going to get behind and support a very material development in agritech, and I applaud the New Zealand government and others involved for that initiative. In Australia, we're on that similar path, and by working together, we can be a lot stronger.
Thanks very much for that. Thanks very much for that, Coppo. Just a couple of things, just backing up the point you made on water. Last year, for those that on the call that might not have been aware, New Zealand and Australia did do quite a lot of trans-Tasman work around an initiative called the Bridge Hub Water Challenge, and a number of both research organisations and startups on both sides of the Tasman took part in that, and it was a really interesting opportunity to see how basically entities from both sides of the Tasman could work together on an area of mutual interest. I can see raised hand, John, so just butt in, John, please.
So Peter, I just want to add one comment to what and build on what Andrew said about being a technology exporter or a technology importer, because I think this is a huge issue for Australia and potentially also for New Zealand. In my previous life, I did a lot of deals with some of the big multinationals, including Bayer and what have you, Syngenta and what have you. But it's really important people understand their focus, because it's not on Australia and New Zealand. They are focused on building technologies that work in South America, technologies that work in Europe, technologies that then maybe they look at South America. And then they look at where else could they flog this around the world. If you look at the companies and the offices they have in Australia, at least, they're largely marketing. And I summarise it by saying, you've got to be careful you're not the market of last resort for some of these technologies. And the best way to guard against that is be an exporter of technology, be a country that they can't afford not to partner with. So there's a really big downside of that option of saying we're just going to be a technology importer, because the downside is you won't get the technology as fast as your competitors. You'll get it a long time afterwards. So to me, this is a really critical issue for Australia, is that we get on the front foot, we get a vibrant agri-food tech sector happening in Australia, that we are an organisation like Israel where you can't afford but to have your R&D office based, so that you get on top of these ideas as they come to the market. So to me, this is a huge challenge, not just to create a sector in its own right, but to ensure that our farmers actually get access to the best technology as fast as everyone else, and preferably before them.
Thanks, John. Penny, I think you raised your hand, so please.
Yeah, I just wanted to perhaps throw in one more grower perspective, because I know we've recognised there's definite overlap. We've recognised we've got the same or similar challenges around carbon, water, sustainability, social license, you name it, compliance. But and the proof for collaboration is real. Comes to economies of scale and attracting investment. But I also think that collaboration between Australia and New Zealand should flow down to the growers and producers as well. I think no one knows farmers' problems like farmers do. And I know another good program that AgriFutures have been funding and running has been the Farmers to Founders program, which has been excellent. We've talked about how RDCs are trying to get better at commercialising a lot of their research and tech and ideas, and that's been a good outcome where farmers have been able to commercialise or get to the next level of ideas that help themselves and other farmers. And I can see that being a great initiative to be able to share between Australia and New Zealand as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Penny. Obviously, admired the work of Sarah Nollett and AgriFutures in particular around that particular program. It's a great opportunity. It really does provide an incentive for growers and farmers to be at the centre of innovation. We have a very similar kind of program in New Zealand called Innovation Lab, based out of Manawatu, and that's an organisation where growers and farmers are at the centre of the innovation kind of life cycle. Absolutely understand and appreciate the value of that approach. We only have 4 minutes left. Unfortunately, Andrew raised a subject which is very close to my heart at the moment, which is around the impact of climate and the role that agri-food tech can play. For those that don't know, I'm actually co-chairing the Agri-Food Tech Climate Summit at COP26 in Glasgow in November. And so that's a fairly significant opportunity to identify ways in which agri-food technologies are able to potentially mitigate against greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. But given we've only got 3 minutes left, I'd just like to ask each of you really to sum up in kind of a minute your kind of the one area that you think collaboration with New Zealand is kind of most important, and also potentially something that could actually really happen, as opposed to just being a word, but actually being something that can take a real form. So, Andrew, if I can ask you that question first.
Thanks, Peter. I think I'll stick with the theme before, and the one that you've already championed before, and that's water. I just can't think of an area that you've got so much expertise and we need here in Australia. And again, I think it's going to be the challenge of our times. We simply can't feed the world if we don't have it and we don't use it better and more wisely and in a more sustainable fashion. And unfortunately, the UN still say that whilst 70% of the freshwater drawdowns on the planet are used in agriculture, about 60% of them are still wasted due to overwatering and poor management policies. It's an insane number. It wouldn't be acceptable with any other resource that we've got. So I think we can collaborate on that as a region and be really good and have a massive export opportunity to the world.
Thanks, Andrew. John, if I can turn to you, same question.
Just very briefly, I think we need to present to the world as one. Together, we have critical mass. Separately, we don't have critical mass. We need to make it easy for people in other parts of the world to do business with us. And if they can come and do one trip and see both Australia and New Zealand in the one trip. So the more we can coordinate our activities and make it easier, and the more we can present to the world as one, I think the better both countries will be.
Thanks very much, John. And Bob, same question.
Well, from a research perspective, I guess where we could have common ground from a technological perspective is how to use big data to improve our agronomy, agricultural practices, but also our crop breeding. And that's something that could be done in a virtual space as well. So I see that as a real opportunity for us. And what Coppo and John have said in terms of the scale and how that could be applied to the issues that are of climate change and water use, it's applicable across a whole range of different areas.
Thanks, Bob. And finally, Penny, the grower perspective.
Yeah, I think the thing that will bring us closest together is around our carbon footprint, carbon accounting, greenhouse gas emissions reduction. We all know our mandate, and agriculture used to be seen as this problem that needed to be fixed in that area, but I can see the table is turning where we're also an opportunity to solve a lot of the carbon issues. So I see that as an exciting space, not just as a producer, but also as a lover of agri-tech. because we need it to help us solve those issues and be able to do it in a faster, more accurate and effective way.
Great. Well, thank you, Penny. That's, I think, a great way to end this particular session. Once again, Coppo.
Sorry, Peter, could I just add to close? Sorry. You know, obviously, so that people have got an action item that's definitive out of this. You know, if you're interested in collaborating with Australia, please drop us a line at ausagritech.org or at GrowAg, or contact Peter or you know, Agritech New Zealand and your partners over there, because you know, there are huge opportunities to really leverage this. The time to do it is now. We don't have time to wait. And you know, obviously, thank you for your interest in putting today's event together, Peter. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Coppo, for that. And also John, Bob and Penny, really appreciate your time. As Coppo has just said, now is the time for action. And I'm sure there'll be many follow-ups to this particular call, but thank you very much for joining the call, and thank you for everybody else who has attended.